everybody. This is our Katie Frekhtman, a New York City personal injury trial attorney, and today we're talking about back injuries. Now, the most common back injury is either a bulging disc or a herniated disc, and that's what you see here. You have the vertebrae, which is the bone down here. This is the seventh vertebrae in the neck. And then you have the disc itself. And as you can see, the disc has jelly or a nucleus in the middle. And that jelly can then, because of the trauma, break through all of the walls or rings of the disc and then leak outside the disc. And when that happens, the jelly is now touching or impinging upon the nerves. As you see, there's nerves running up and down vertically, and then they go horizontally to various parts. The nerves from your neck will travel down to your arms, and that's known as radiculopathy, the radiating pain, or the pain traveling down to your fingers and to your arms and shoulders. So you could see that here, the nerve roots, and then the herniation causes it to touch the nerve. Now here you have an example of whiplash, and that's a very common injury after a car crash. Whiplash just means that the head goes forward and then back. And you see here, it really moves beyond the neck's normal range of motion, because you have normal range of motion and you don't want the neck to move beyond that normal range of motion, because if you do, it could affect the cervical spine, which includes the actual vertebrae, the discs, the vertebrae, the disc itself, the nerves, the ligaments, the muscles, the tendons. Everything involved is just getting stretched and moved in a way that is beyond the normal range of motion, and that causes injury. And here you could see the different phases of whiplash. So in the first phase, you have a compression of the cervical spine, creating an S shape, and that's phase one, where it can injure the bones and discs of the spine. And then in phase two, the head is forced backwards, stretching or tearing the ligaments, as well as possibly the discs. You see here, you have the disc being possibly torn, and then you also have the vertebrae. It's hyperextension. It goes back. And then in phase three, it's forced forward again, and it can injure the ligaments and that attach the head to the neck and injure those ligaments and tear membranes as well as discs. And then in phase four, the neck bends forward forcefully and tears the ligaments in the back of the spine again. This is just an illustration of how it can happen. Now, this is a top view of a herniated disc, and you see here you have the fecal sac that houses all of the nerve roots, you have the spinal cord, you have the vertebrae here, and then again you have the nucleus, the jelly, inside the walls of the disc. And then here, when it leaks out and breaks through all the walls, now that jelly is leaking and it's touching the fecal sac, so it's being impinged here. That's spinal cord compression, and then it can also leak and touch other things. And here you have a side view. What happens here is the herniated disc is compressing the nerve, and actually some doctors say that when you stand up, as opposed to when you lay down. So in some positions, that herniation, because it is a jelly, it could actually leak back in, and then an MRI might say it's normal, whereas in reality you have the herniation. So when you stand up, it could leak back in, but when you lay down, it might leak back out again, and vice versa. So it's important to do the MRI in both positions sometimes. And now here you have all the different types of abnormalities of discs. It goes from bulging. Bulging disc just means that the wall is bulging out, but the jelly is still inside the disc. Herniated means it's like ruptured, or it's herniated, it's broken, and now the liquid is leaking out. Ruptured is even more than herniated. It means that so you can see the picture of ruptured. It means that it's almost like a canal, right? It's almost like a river, and everything's like flowing out. And sequestered or fragmented means that now pieces of that nucleus pulposus are being sequestered and fragmented and leaking down. So yeah, it's pretty, and this is interesting. This actually shows you the different parts of the body that are affected by the, what corresponds to what. So for example, you have C6, which is cervical, the sixth cervical vertebrae, and that corresponds to your thumb, whereas the seventh one goes to your index finger, and the eighth one goes to the pinky finger. T1 is more like under the shoulder, the scapula. C2 is the head. Yeah, and then this chart is actually much more in depth. This chart shows you everything. So you could see, for example, with this chart, you could see that you have, it's very specific. Like you have, for example, C2 has to do with the eyes. C1 has to do with the face. And if you have an injury to C1, you might have headaches. If you have an injury to C2, you may have, for example, sinus issues. C6 is the shoulder and neck muscles. You could have tight shoulders. And it tells you the functions, like C6 affects the wrist and elbow movement. We actually had a case where somebody was injured. They had a C6 injury with radiculopathy, and it did affect their wrist. They had a wrist injury as well. So it's all interrelated, and you see what part of the disc, those nerves, where they're going, right? Because those nerves are going somewhere, and they're affecting a part of the body. The same thing with the lumbar, with the lower back. Like a very common injury is L5-S1, and you could see L5 is the lower legs, the feet, and the ankles. And it could result, if the nerves are pinched, you can get poor circulation, swollen ankles, and then the sacrum has to do with the hips. So you could have spinal conditions or sacroiliac issues. So this is an interesting chart. Then you have what's known as chemical radiculopathy. What that basically means is that the entire disc has nerves all around it. And you could see that those nerves are not just in one place, they're everywhere. Like you have nerves here in the fecal sac, in the cauda equina. You have nerves going out with branches. There are lateral branches, medial branches, all different types of branches. Some of the nerves go into the facet joints, which are behind it. That's the vertebrae. You could have tears of, like this is an annular tear. The wall of the disc is torn. So you can have tears in the wall of the disc. That's a distinct injury. But you could also have like innervation of the disc. So there's nerves around the disc that could be affected. And then you have all these different issues. And it leads to radicular pain, which is what we talked about, the traveling pain, right? The radiculopathy or the radiating pain. And this shows the annular tears, which is tears in the wall of the disc. That's a type of injury that you can get from an accident. The nucleus pulposus is intact. It's not herniated, but you have annular tears. Here's another injury that you get, and this is a compression fracture. This happens very often if you have, let's say, a pedestrian hit by a car. We actually had a case where a lady was hit by a car. She had a compression fracture of her back, and the case was being handled by another lawyer. They wanted to settle the case for, I think, $20,000. We took the case, we worked it up, we told her human story, and it was actually supposed to go to trial right before the pandemic. I think March 23rd, 2020 was supposed to go to trial. It ended up settling during COVID for close to $500,000, close to $500,000. But a compression fracture, even her fracture, no surgery, it could be a very serious injury. It could really affect you. And this shows you one of the ways that it can. It's known as retropulsion. So what happens is you have the broken up into little pieces, and then those pieces can then, the bone can then impinge upon the spinal cord and cause pain because the fracture fragment is being displaced into the canal. And that could lead to a very serious spinal cord injury, and that's known as retropulsed bone. And that's what she had. And this just shows you what's known as range of motion. So you always have range of motion. You need to be able to move, and there's a certain standards of what's normal range of motion. So for example, if normal range of motion is 45 degrees and you have 20 degrees, well, again, you have less than half of normal range of motion. That's a real problem. And in New York, we have to prove a serious injury. So in order to prove serious injury, one of the ways we prove it is we get a doctor to say normal is 45, this patient had 20, that's a significant, more than 50% reduction. And they give us the degree and the percentage, and then you show that, hey, this is not normal, that I can't move my neck in the normal way. And then you have all of these tables of range of motion at different dates. So let's say 2 weeks after the accident, a few months after the accident, even 2 or 3 years after the crash, and then you say, look, it's permanent because it's been like 3 years, and they still have these range of motion deficits. So that's very helpful. The next one here, this shows different types of injuries. This shows osteophytes. So osteophytes basically are injuries that you usually get from living your life. They're known as degenerative. And what the big fight is between plaintiffs and defendants, the insurance companies, their lawyers often say, well, it's degenerative. It's not from this crash, but it just degenerates over time. Everyone gets older, everyone gets osteophytes, everyone gets hypertrophy, and that's something that just happens. So you're trying to make money just from living your life and getting these natural injuries. And so it's important for an attorney to understand the difference, because if you could show the difference, hey, this is an osteophyte, or if your doctor on the stand could show the difference, this is what an osteophyte looks like, and this is a traumatic injury. And then this particular patient has a traumatic injury caused by the crash. It is not an osteophyte, and they show the difference. It's very powerful because it kind of kills their argument, because that's always their argument, that this is an osteophyte, this is a hypertrophy, this is not from the crash. And this photo, this illustration, what this shows is all of the ways that those nerves travel. You see, like, you have ventral roots, dorsal roots, you have dorsal branches. Basically, the way it connects to the spinal column, and then you have all these nerves running everywhere, and there's all these different branches and roots. And so this shows it in more specificity. And this final one will actually show you what's known as the medial branches. So like we talked about, you have the vertical up and down nerves running here, but then you have horizontal nerves, big nerve branches, and they're running to various parts. Like we talked about, the one from the neck could run to the hand, specifically the C6 might run to the thumb, very, very specific. But then you also have medial branches. You see these little ones here, they branch off, and they actually go around the facet joints, around the vertebrae. So if those get injured due to a herniated disc, because the disc could be herniated and it could be touching those nerve roots, those medial branches could be injured. And so then there are different types of procedures, like medial branch blocks, where they put in medicine, and the medicine will prevent you from feeling the pain, or ablation, where they go in and they'll actually ablate or burn the nerve so that you don't have the pain. And these are the smaller nerves over here. So I hope this has been helpful. Let us know what questions you have. This is just a quick summary of some of the injuries we see, some of the back injuries we see often. And then maybe we'll do some more videos where we talk about procedures like epidural steroid injections, percutaneous discectomies, fusion surgeries, and more specifically, procedures that doctors do to cure and to heal people after back injuries. But this video is more about the back injuries themselves. So I hope this has been helpful. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Let us know what questions you have. If you have a question about a back injury that wasn't covered in this video, a more specific question, let us know. We'd be happy to do a video to answer your question. And like I said, please keep in touch. Let's get some interaction. We love when we have interaction from our viewers. And let us know what future topics you want to see so we can do that for you. Maybe we'll do some lives as well, where we go on live and we answer your questions. Okay, have a great day, everyone. Talk to you very soon, and have a great day. Bye-bye.